This is the Jackson Neill Sports Podcast. Welcome back here on Friday, November 1st, 2019. First episode of November. Got to kick the month off right. Today, I have one of my favorites. Bill Bender of Sporting News. They're one of their national college football writers. I talked with him about the Big Ten. And before we jump into that conversation, I want to remind everyone that this podcast is available on all of your favorite platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, YouTube, SoundCloud. Basically, wherever podcasts are, this podcast is there. So make sure to subscribe so you can get the new episodes every single Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So right now in college football, it's a really, really cool time. I mean, always around November, it's an interesting time, but I think this season has another layer of interest to it. Maybe that's the reason why I've had 3 straight college football topics on my sports podcast this week. But really, if you look at the top 25 right now, there are a lot of storylines going on. Whether it's the college football playoff, how we're still seeing some of these top teams remain, how next weekend looks like we're going to get the first game of the century since 2011, the last time Alabama and LSU played each other. There is a lot going on in college football. That's why I brought on Chris Hummer on Wednesday to talk about the Big 12, a conference I think just has so many crazy possibilities still alive. I mean, Baylor got that close win against West Virginia last night to keep their college football playoff hopes alive. Just a crazy thought. Did not expect that, to be saying that at this late in the season going into this year. If you want to check out that podcast, go back in the feed and check out Wednesday's episode. But today I wanted to bring on Bill Bender because I wanted to talk about the Big Ten, because I think that is, with the Big 12 and SEC, those are the 3 most intriguing conferences at the moment in college football. The Big 12 for those couple of reasons with Oklahoma loss, the SEC for obvious reasons with all the top teams, but the Big 10 also has some interesting storylines, whether is Ohio State the best team in the country? I mean, they kind of have looked like it. And how many Heisman candidates do they have on that team? Bill says they have 3. I kind of buy into that. Then there's a team like Penn State who we thought coming into this year, best case scenario might be getting that Rose Bowl bid, but with maybe 2 or even 3 losses. They're still undefeated. They're a top 5 team. How good are they, even with all the talent they lost from last year's squad? Then you have a team like Minnesota in the other division who's still undefeated, and PJ Fleck has them playing really good football coming down the stretch right now, and they're going to be playing Penn State pretty soon. So there's just a ton of stuff going on in the Big Ten. That's why I decided to bring Bill on to discuss all of it, to figure out what exactly is going on in this conference, and is Ohio State still the favorite? Bill and I discuss all of that right here in this conversation. Just as of right now, is Ohio State still the favorite in this conference?
Oh, yeah. I think so, Jackson. I think they are by far head and shoulders the best team in the conference. I mean, it's not to say they're not going to get challenged in November. Certainly Penn State, playing well, has a fast defense. I think Penn State might even be a little ahead of schedule. That's kind of a consensus on them. Anytime you go to Michigan, it's not going to be easy, or as easy as people think it's going to be. And the Wolverines have a ton of confidence after last week. But yeah, the Buckeyes, I mean, they have 3 Heisman candidates. They're the most complete team in the country right now. They check a lot of boxes, and they're going to be tough to beat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I mean, you said they're one of the most complete teams in the country. I mean, right now, I have them as my second best team in the country. Is that far out to say? Are they really there as one of the top teams in the country?
Well, they will be after next week anyway. So whoever loses Alabama, LSU is going to fall behind them. And then they'll be in line to be right there with Alabama, LSU. I've said all along, I know how good they are. I don't know if they are good enough to beat Alabama, LSU, or Clemson. I know they're good enough to play with them, though. And I think that's what's changed from 2016 when they went out there and Clemson beat them 31-0, and it was an embarrassing game for the Buckeyes. So those are the 4 best teams in the country right now, and I don't see that changing unless a Penn State or somebody else gets in the way.
Mm-hmm. Right there, you said you could see them competing, but maybe not winning against the Clemsons, or LSU, or Alabama. What gives you the hesitation with this Ohio State team?
Because I haven't seen it in 3 years. I remember, that was one of my mistakes as a writer when they played in 2016. I assumed Ohio State would just go out and beat Clemson. And then Clemson had a better defensive line, of course, they had Deshaun Watson and, very good receivers around him. I think one of the things that gives me hesitation is I believe that Clemson's a little bit better than people are making out to be. They still have Trevor Lawrence. They still have that offense, and their defense is actually allowing fewer points per game. So some of the Clemson talk is a little bit exaggerated. And, but Ohio State, yeah, they have the athletes to go out and beat a Clemson or, make it fun against Alabama. They beat Alabama last time. So, and a LSU-Ohio State game would be so many levels of fun when you consider the Joe Burrow factor there.
Something you mentioned a little bit ago was on this Ohio State team, the multiple Heisman candidates. And I mean, after last weekend, a lot of people are saying Chase Young has shot up all these Heisman rankings. Who's the bigger Heisman candidate, Justin Fields or Chase Young at this point?
Well, I think you got to rope J.K. Dobbins in there too. But I know they don't give the Heisman to running backs, but I mean, Chase Young is right now, but all it takes is one game where he maybe he doesn't really do anything, or, he gets hurt, and then that's over. That's what happened with Nick Bosa last year. Nick Bosa, you could have made the case, was the most dominant player in college football last year. So I still think Young is probably the best one. But for me, I mean, Dobbins should be getting more love than he is. I mean, only back with at least 150 carries, averaging more than 7 yards per carry, ripped up Michigan State and Wisconsin. And I talked to Kirk Herbstreit a little bit this week, and as he told me, their offense kind of goes with him. When he gets going, they're about as close to unstoppable as you can be.
Yeah, definitely. Do you think he's would you call him the best running back in the Big Ten right now? I mean, I know Jonathan Taylor and Wisconsin have just kind of have had their faults recently. Are you ready to even maybe put Dobbins over Taylor in the Heisman discussion?
Well, I mean, that's probably what's going to happen. I mean, I guess you can always ask the question, well, you flip Taylor and Dobbins in last week's game, does the same thing happen? And the answer is probably yes, because Ohio State's offense isn't one-dimensional. Wisconsin's is. And in the big games, I mean, Jack Cohn can go out and throw against, I would say Illinois, but they lost that game. So you know what I'm getting at here. Ohio State's got a more diversified offense. They're both there. I think Travis Etienne at Clemson's still one of the best running backs in the country who probably doesn't get used as much because they don't have to.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So another team I want to look at is Penn State, right there at second place, and they're fifth in the country. And you're right. I mean, I think they're improving a lot faster than a lot of people expected. I didn't expect them to have this great of a season. What's gone so right for this Nittany Lions team so far this year?
Well, Clifford came in and he's playing well. I mean, it's not overly flashy with him, but I think he just came in. He's comfortable in the system. Noah Cain's starting to come on in the running game, and that's something I thought they would lack after. You lose Barkley, then you lose Sanders. You start to wonder, okay, who's going to run the football for this team? And he's stepped in and done that. And KJ Hamler's playing it. Defensively, depth through recruiting is starting to show for them. And they have that on the defensive side of the ball. They have some young guys. They have depth on the defensive line. Parsons, Tony, who am I leaving out? Gross Matos. I mean, they've got guys that are going to play on Sunday. And the more depth you have and the more guys you have playing on Sunday, the better off you're going to be. I still don't think they can go to Columbus and win, but I say that knowing that the last 2 years, they're the team that's taken Ohio State into the fourth quarter and kind of choked up a couple fourth quarter leads.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, that was my next question, I guess, is what do you think the ceiling is for this Penn State team? Because certainly coming into this season, I was expecting, a couple losses for this team, and yet they're still undefeated. They do still have that big, tough Ohio State game left on the schedule, but they, like you said, they have taken them to pretty far into the fourth quarter in the past couple of years. What do you think the ceiling is for this Penn State team? Is it realistic to think that they could go out there and win the Big Ten Conference this year?
Sure. I mean, all they got to do is go win in Columbus, and they're going to be, as long as they take care of business at Minnesota, and I think they will. I think it's going to be a fun game, though. It's a good spotlight game for Minnesota. As long as they do that, and if they can get that win, then yeah, I mean, that's exactly what can happen. So I think it's about learning that. I mean, obviously, going through Iowa, Michigan, and Michigan State, varying levels of teams, I think Michigan's a really good football team. I've said all along, I've said it about 3 times today to people that, Michigan, the narrative on Michigan is wrong. Their things aren't nearly as bad as people making them out to be. They just haven't beat Ohio State. So that was a huge win for Penn State to get that one.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And I guess what would you say that Penn State would have to do in order to get a win over Ohio State and possibly win that Big Ten championship? What do you think would be the key for this Penn State team to stopping the Buckeyes?
Turnovers, win the turnover battle, do what they did last time they played there, but finish. They got turnovers. They rattled Barrett in that game until about, I think it was I was there, like 6 minutes left, and stop the running game as much as you can, limit Ohio State's possessions. And, the weather played a role in that one. And I'm here based in Central Ohio looking at a bunch of rain today. So, and on the other side, Clifford not getting overwhelmed, not letting Chase Young and that defensive line control the tempo of the game and hit a couple big plays. But, Ohio State hasn't lost a home game in the Big Ten since 2015. And this is something to file away for Penn State fans. That was the week before the Michigan game against a Michigan State team that had a backup quarterback and was able to go in there and win. So it can be done, but you've got to kind of like basketball. You got to limit the other team's possessions to do that.
Mm-hmm. And then you're right, and then finish the game, something that Penn State struggled to do against Ohio State in recent years. I want to focus a little bit on Minnesota because they're another undefeated team in this conference, and certainly a team that I did not expect to get this far into the season without a loss. How serious should we be taking Minnesota? I mean, they haven't really played too many marquee games yet. What's your read on this Golden Gophers team?
I mean, they played their schedule. That's all you can do is play your schedule and beat the teams on your schedule. And, obviously they had a nail biter in the opener, and you can make the argument that their best win was against South Dakota State because they got that win and then they moved on. And they PJ's not for everybody. PJ's methods are a little hokey. He does things his way, and it rubs some people the wrong way, that more the old school types. But, they're getting results, and they've got a huge home game. They've got big home games against Iowa, Wisconsin. I don't know if they're home against Iowa. I know they're home against Wisconsin, and, they crushed Nebraska. So I think what he's doing, you got to take notice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, the biggest part of their schedule is still up to come. Right, home against Penn State. They're going at Iowa, and then have that home game against Wisconsin to end it. So 3 of their next 4 games all against ranked opponents. So you mentioned a couple times Michigan, and Michigan's been an up and down team so far this season. Although you're arguing that it's a lot better of a team than people have given them credit for. Do you think they're good enough to warrant Jim Harbaugh keeping his job once this season's over?
Well, yeah. I mean, they're not going to fire Jim Harbaugh. I mean, who would coach Michigan if they're going to fire a guy that's won 10 games 3 of the last 4 years? And they could win 10 games again. I mean, in what universe are we firing that coach just because he lost to Ohio State, who, as I remind people, Urban was about 3 years ahead of him when he got there. And I've probably answered this question about 1,000 times during the season. And no, Jim Harbaugh will not get fired. He's not going to the NFL. He will come back next year. And, I've never understood that narrative at all, to be quite honest with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it comes from the place that, Michigan is just a program that they expect to be at the highest level, and they're always getting there. It's just that record against Ohio State that's really been the knock against Harbaugh, I'd say, in his time there in Ann Arbor.
Well, yeah, but I mean, they were 6 inches away from winning that game in 2016, and they got blown out last year. So, but I mean, I tell people this all the time, how many teams are truly capable of winning a national championship in college football right now? Probably about 4, 5, maybe. I mean, Penn State's really good. They're not ready for a national championship yet. Clemson, Alabama, LSU, Ohio State, that's probably going to be the playoff, and that's probably the list. Maybe Georgia. I guess they've been close, but that's the problem. I mean, you look at Michigan, they just didn't take the leap that LSU did. They've got a top 10 program, and they just haven't beat Ohio State. He's beat Penn State. He's beat Michigan State. He's done everything but win the Big Ten. And, not a lot of, like I just said, Ohio State hasn't lost a home game in the Big Ten since 2015. So it's not like everybody else is dominating the Big Ten.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's a very good point. So right now, just wrapping this up, my last question is, right now, if you had to make the prediction, still some big games left in this conference, though. Who do you think comes out on top in the Big Ten?
Oh, Ohio State. I mean, that's the easy answer, because if they beat Penn State and they beat Michigan, whoever they play out of the West is not going to be, they're not going to lose to Minnesota and Indianapolis. They're not going to lose to Wisconsin. I guess Wisconsin could throw something different at them on a neutral site and pray. But if they beat Penn State and Michigan, really good chance they're going to be 13-0. They've avoided the inexplicable loss on the road this year, and they've ran the ball better and they play better defense. So it's hard to, I guess Penn State could win the Big Ten, but I'd have to see it to believe it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I agree with that. And you should look at the rest of Ohio State's schedule. If you're looking for that inexplicable loss on the road, the only candidate left is Rutgers. And I'm just going to go out on a limb here and say that's not going to happen.
Yeah, I don't think Rutgers is going to beat Ohio. They did that earlier in the year. They got the places where they are. And Ryan Day's got them playing, like I said, complete football in all three phases. And it's hard to pick against a team that's playing that well.
Mm-hmm. I definitely agree with that one. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Bill.
Hey, no problem, Jackson. Thanks for having me on.
Remember to go over to sportingnews.com and check out Bill's stuff. I have the links to his work down in the description. He's one of my favorite college football writers. He just wrote a piece, actually, about the top 10 college football games for the month of November. Highly, highly recommend that one. So go down into the show notes on whatever platform you're listening on and check out his work. And with that, that'll wrap it up for this episode of the Jackson Neill Sports Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. Remember, subscribe to this podcast on your favorite platform, because new episodes come out every single Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. For more episodes of this podcast, as well as my interview series, Anything Goes with Jackson Neill, and my music discussion podcast, go over to jacksonneillpodcast.com. There's the archive for all of my podcasts. If you're a really big fan of the show, maybe consider becoming a subscriber on Patreon. Over there, for just a couple dollars a month or even $1 a month, you can get access to cool bonus content right here from all of my podcasts. I write, record, produce, do all of these things for my podcast myself as a full-time college student, so any little bit of support just helps me spend more time making these cool episodes. If you want to stay up to date on everything that I'm doing, you can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at JacksonNeil20. Today's music is by Analog by Nature with their song CDK Sunday. Thanks again for listening. I'll see you all next time.